Chapter 1399. Gu Xingyin thought that she should stay far away from this woman. Stay far away from her. If He Qing couldn't find her, she couldn't possibly set her sights on her, right? He Qing went skiing. With her financial resources, she naturally booked the entire place. Gu Xingyin tried it. She used a small trick to cause a slight avalanche. She just wanted to see just how good He Qing's life was. The result didn't disappoint her at all. If an ordinary person encountered that avalanche, the chances of dying would be more than 80%. However, He Qing didn't even suffer a fracture. It was because of the cold that she caught a small cold. She didn't even have a fever. She could be fine after drinking a cup of water and taking a pill. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, felt a sense of oppression from the unseen world. This was a warning from the heavenly Tao. As the god of death, she just had to do her job well. She smiled bitterly. In the end, she gave up on the idea of doing something in the dark. In terms of duties, Gu Xingyin wasn't busy. There were many gods of death like her in the underworld. Each person only needed to be in charge of a specific area. In this case, the workload wasn't huge. Therefore, sometimes she might have to guide many people in a day. Sometimes no one died for several days. Sometimes Qiao Zhihe would call for her. If she was free, she would go and see her little prince. Gu Xingyin had never interacted with her lover like this. She had been his sister, his disciple, his master, and even his nurturer. But she had never appeared in his life as an idol-like existence like now. To the current Qiao Zhihe, Sister Death was a mysterious and intimate god. She was very powerful and knew many things that he couldn't even imagine. Although she looked cold, she would try her best to satisfy his every request. Qiao Zhihe felt that Sister Death was much more powerful than those so-called superheroes in the movies. However, she seemed to be very busy and only had time to visit him occasionally. Qiao Zhihe had once asked if Sister Death was busy saving the world like the superheroes in the movies. His words almost made Gu Xingyin laugh. Her tone was as cold as ever. Little Crane, you can go look for some information. We Grim Reapers are not heroes. We are the exact opposite of the popular superheroes. Humans hate Grim Reapers the most. Because our appearance can only mean death. She didn't say much, but the little Qiao Zhihe remembered her words in his heart. When he grew up and learned to think independently, he slowly searched for information about the Grim Reaper. This information also allowed him to understand his big sister Death better. The Grim Reaper was a deity of the underworld. They wore black cloaks and black gloves. Their entire bodies were shrouded in darkness. No one could see their faces. The black scythe was a divine weapon for harvesting souls. Their appearance represented death. Those who could see the Grim Reaper were all souls that were about to enter the underworld. Qiao Zhihe started to feel a little puzzled when he read to the end. All the information stated that mortals could not see the Grim Reaper. Only those who were about to die could see it. But he could see Sister Death all the time. Chapter 1400. If only someone who was about to die could see Sister Death, then he had been dead for many years. Qiao Zhihe shook his head and didn't take it seriously. He was vaguely curious about another matter. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. This year, Qiao Zhihe was 14 years old, and had reached the age of first awakening of love. This year He Qing was 28 years old, and was still playing around in the human world. Gu Xingyin had been in this world for 7 years. She had completely adapted to today's life. While paying attention to He Qing's movements, she would occasionally visit Qiao Zhihe. Most of the time, she was bringing the souls of the dead back and forth between the worlds of the living and the dead. The system couldn't help but sigh. This was really the most dedicated world for the host. Wasn't it dedication? Gu Xingyin had completed the work of the death god perfectly. But Gu Xingyin actually felt stifled. Sometimes, when she looked at He Qing, she wished she could kill her with her own hands. This woman, if not for her great fortune in her previous life, she would have died countless times in this life. She had no morals at all. Gu Xingyin stayed by her side, and watched as she forced the handsome young men she fancied to submit to her. He watched as her private life was messy, and he watched as she did some shady things in private. She even injected drugs into an innocent person with her own hands. She couldn't stop it, because the death god couldn't care about the affairs of the human world. She had tried many times to send the evidence to the police. The evidence was enough to send anyone to prison for 8 to 10 years. But it was useless. When the evidence was sent to the police, it either became a stack of white paper with nothing on it, or it became fake. Gu Xingyin then knew that He Qing really couldn't be brought down in this life. She unscrupulously enjoyed the good fortune left behind by her previous life, and in the next life, she had to bear the sins of this life. Was this fair? It wasn't. But what could Gu Xingyin say? She was just a death god who relied on this world's heavenly axiom to survive. She couldn't get out of this situation. Gu Xingyin sometimes wanted to avoid it, but she couldn't help it. Even if she couldn't do anything, she wanted to watch and remember. There would always be one person who would silently witness all the sins that this woman had committed. He would remember them all. The 14th birthday of the Qiao family's young master was held in the Qiao family's villa. The Qiao family didn't publicize the news, but they knew what they needed to know. He was the only son of the Qiao family's third generation, and the future head of the Qiao family. Such an identity was very precious. However, Qiao Zhihe seemed a little absent-minded the entire day. The meticulous Qiao Mu looked at her son, and quietly pulled him to the side. "What's wrong, Xiaohe? You seem to have something on your mind." Qiao Zhihe showed a gentle smile. "Mom, you worry too much." "I'm fine." His smile was very clean, like the most dazzling warm sun in early spring. It was said that the young master of the Qiao family had inherited all the advantages of his parents' looks. When he grew up, he would be amazing. Qiao Mu looked at her son and couldn't help but feel proud. After waiting for the banquet to end and the guests to leave, Qiao Zhihe used the excuse that he was tired and wanted to rest. He then returned to his room. Sister Death God is back, right? She would remember her birthday every year. Chapter 1401. Qiao Zhihe sat on the bed, waiting for Gu Xingyin's arrival. He was even thinking about what gift Sister Death would bring him. Just as he lowered his head to think, a cold wind blew, and Qiao Zhihe raised his head happily. Sister Death. He still didn't know Gu Xingyin's name, so he had always called her Sister Death. The wide black cloak quietly fell to the ground, and the pure black scythe was cold and sharp. But Qiao Zhihe wasn't afraid at all. He knew that this person wouldn't hurt him. Gu Xingyin gently opened her hand, and a dark red light rose from her palm, slowly flying in front of Qiao Zhihe. After the red light faded, its original appearance was revealed. It was a droplet-shaped red crystal, about the size of a thumb, reflecting a beautiful luster under the light. "Happy birthday, little crane," Gu Xingyin said softly. Qiao Zhihe put this beautiful stone under his pillow very carefully. Gu Xingyin said, "This thing can protect your safety at a critical moment." She thought for a moment, moved her hands, and the stone under Qiao Zhihe's pillow returned to her hands. But at this time, there was an extra red line on the stone. "Lower your head," Gu Xingyin said. Qiao Zhihe immediately understood what she wanted to do. He lowered his head obediently. A 14-year-old boy was no shorter than death. But Qiao Zhihe was very curious. The hood clearly didn't completely cover Sister Death's face, but why couldn't he see it clearly? He suddenly raised his head. The two were very close, and Gu Xingyin's hand was still on his neck. From afar, the two looked like they were hugging. At such a close distance, Qiao Zhihe could only see a beautiful pale chin. His heart moved, and he wanted to do something, but Gu Xingyin had already let go of his hand and took a step back. For some reason, Qiao Zhihe's heart suddenly surged with disappointment. He didn't even know where this disappointment came from. Gu Xingyin looked at him quietly. "You are unhappy." Qiao Zhihe froze for a moment. Was he unhappy? What was he unhappy about? Gu Xingyin looked at his blank face and sighed in her heart. She just thought that it was a change in the temperament of an adolescent child. She looked at him and suddenly said, "Today is your birthday. I'll grant you a wish, okay?" Qiao Zhihe's eyes lit up as the faint anticipation in his heart began to stir. Gu Xingyin saw the child in front of her looking at her with bright eyes. "Sister Death, can you promise me 2 things? Gu Xingyin shook her head slightly. He stretched out a finger. Her meaning was very clear. She could only agree to one request. Qiao Zhihe hesitated for a moment and said, Then can you pull down your hood and let me see what you look like? He had known Death since he was 7 years old, but until the age of 14, other than calling her big sister Death, he didn't even know her name or what she looked like. Gu Xingyin was stunned. She didn't expect that Qiao Zhihe would make such a request. Seeing that she didn't move for a long time, Qiao Zhihe couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Sister Death. When he shouted this, there was a coquettish tone in his voice that even he didn't notice. Chapter 1402. Only in front of people who were extremely close to him would the gentle and polite young master of the Qiao family show a trace of childishness. Gu Xingyin had no resistance to Qiao Zhihe at all. She hesitated for a moment, and finally, under the child's burning gaze, she stretched out her hand and pulled down the hood on her head. Qiao Zhihe's eyes widened. The moment the hood was pulled down, silver gray hair flowed down like a waterfall. And Qiao Zhihe's eyes were tightly held by the person in front of him. Gray hair, gray eyes, obviously different from a human's appearance. But on her, it didn't feel out of place at all. The Death in front of him had a delicate face that was difficult to describe with a brush, but at the same time, because of the bloodless face and overly pale lips, this delicate face had a hint of fragility. Of course, this fragility was indeed just a look, and no one dared to underestimate the sickle of the Death. Qiao Zhihe looked at this person without blinking. Since he was 7 years old, he had been fantasizing about the appearance of Sister Death in his mind. He once wondered if the other party would be like the description in fairy tales, a skeleton? Perhaps a strange creature that looked completely different from a human, or a beautiful female god. When he really saw her face, he thought, so this is what Sister Death looks like. That's right, Sister Death should look like this. He stared blankly until the other party's gaze looked over. It was almost a cold gaze, but after 7 years of living with the Death in front of him, Qiao Zhihe's cold heart was actually very soft. Qiao Zhihe's gentle face suddenly burst into a very bright smile. His bright eyes gazed at Gu Xingyin, and almost said in an excited tone, Sister Death, you're really beautiful. Gu Xingyin heard this and didn't have any reaction. She only stretched out her hand and pulled back the hood that had just fallen down. Once again, her stunning appearance was completely covered. Appearance, for me, is just a skin. Her cold voice came from the cloak. Qiao Zhihe glanced at the black hood with some regret. Hearing her words, he couldn't help but laugh. But to many humans, beautiful skin is their lifelong pursuit. Gu Xingyin didn't debate with Qiao Zhihe on this issue. The record book in her hand suddenly lit up, which meant that she had something to do. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. You should rest early. Her cold voice sounded in the room. Qiao Zhihe opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but the other party had disappeared. He looked at the place where the other party stood before, and stared blankly for a while, and suddenly laughed again. Lowering his head, Qiao Zhihe grabbed the red crystal in the shape of a water droplet. I don't know what it is, but for Sister Death to treat it so seriously, it should be something very important, right? He sat there and thought silently for a while. Feeling a little sleepy, he fell asleep in a daze. Qiao Zhihe felt very hot. Every cell in his body was clamoring, and there seemed to be a fire burning in the depths of his body. He needed something to quench his thirst, to relieve the restlessness that was everywhere. Suddenly, a cold arm reached out from beside him. It's over. Thank you to all the people who voted for Gigi and gave her tips. Thank you very much, even though I still lost in the PK. After that, it would be 8 every day as usual. Chapter 1403. The eldest daughter, who was holding old Master Zhang's hand, saw him nod, but she didn't understand what he meant. The next moment, old Master Zhang found that he could speak. His body seemed to have returned to when he was young. However, he remembered the words of the black figure just now. He only had 10 minutes left. Although he really wanted to scold these ingrates that he had raised, he obviously had more important things to do at this moment. Old Master Zhang looked at the man standing at the side. Lawyer Qi, I have something to ask of you. His lawyer quickly walked over. Everyone in the room was amazed. Just now, this old man looked like he was about to die. They didn't expect him to suddenly wake up. However, some people guessed that it might be the final radiance of the setting sun. Old Master Zhang glanced into the room. He was worried that these three good-for-nothings would come back and cause trouble later. So he told them to all leave. His three children looked a little uneasy, but under the gazes of others, they didn't dare to do anything. They could only walk out. When the room quieted down, Old Master Zhang looked at the lawyer beside him. "Lawyer Qi, please draft a new will for me." About 8 minutes later, Lawyer Qi walked out with a serious expression. He looked at Old Master Zhang's children without leaving a trace. Then he turned around. "Old Master Zhang, everyone go in and see him for the last time." Everyone hurried into the room. Sure enough, they saw that Old Master Zhang, who was still in high spirits just now, had started to turn green. It was obvious that he had reached the last step. Old Master Zhang forced his eyes open. He looked at his three children and smiled. He opened his mouth, but in the end he closed his eyes weakly. "Dad! Dad!" The three of them started crying when Old Master Zhang closed his eyes. The guests at the side all said that Old Master Zhang had enjoyed enough good fortune in this life to have three filial children. Old Master Zhang, who was lying on the bed, was now standing beside Gu Xingyin. He looked at his slightly transparent body with curiosity, then looked at his old body on the bed. "Aren't you sad?" A cold voice sounded in his ear. Turning around to look at the Grim Reaper beside him, Old Man Zhang laughed. "What am I sad about? I've already enjoyed everything that I should have in this world. The last few days were even a little painful. After I died, I felt a sense of relief and strength that I had not felt for a long time. Furthermore, before he died, he even took revenge for her, didn't he? Then come with me." Gu Xingyin said faintly and turned to leave. Old Man Zhang followed behind her and asked, "Can I see the fate of my three evil creatures before I leave?" Gu Xingyin paused for a moment, then stretched out a hand and pointed at the void. Old Master Zhang saw what was about to happen. At the end of his funeral, before all the guests had left, Lawyer Qi announced the will he had made before his death. All the assets under his name had been donated to welfare organizations, leaving nothing for his children. His three daughters naturally refused to believe it. They had planned for so long and even done such a thing. Wasn't it all for this wealth? Lawyer Qi's expression didn't change at all when someone pointed at his nose and accused him of tampering with the will. Apart from the will, Old Master Zhang also suspects that his death is related to Miss Zhang and the two Mr. Zhangs. "I've already called the police. The police will talk to the three of you later." Old Master Zhang watched in silence and didn't say anything else. He followed Gu Xingyin into the underworld. Chapter 1404. Recently, He Qing felt that her spring had come. The 30-year-old woman felt that her heart, which had never been moved before, was beating because of a man. She had met that man in a surfing competition. He was tall and strong, and he was also very good-looking. After a while, the two of them successfully hooked up in bed. It was originally a consensual adult game, but He Qing felt that she was getting more and more immersed in it. With her personality, she would never allow herself to be taken advantage of. Since she had taken a fancy to him, he was naturally hers. That man had a family, and he was not willing to break up his family because of a casual relationship. He Qing agreed on the surface, but the next moment, she began to secretly find someone to deal with his wife. Her methods were very rough. Since you can't bear to part with your wife, just make her disappear. She found someone to create an accident when the man's wife got off work. Gu Xingyin saw a faint gray aura on the poor woman. That was the color of the dead. In other words, He Qing's plan would succeed. The woman would die in a traffic accident today, and the driver would have to compensate a large sum of money. But what he could get from He Qing was far more than that. When the car with a faulty brake hit the woman, Gu Xingyin's hand moved in her sleeve. The woman only felt that there was a force pushing her, and she fell to the side. Before she could understand what had happened, she saw a car whizzing past her. At such a speed, if it hit her, she would have no chance of survival. There was no one beside her, but at that moment, she did feel a force acting on her body. The woman thought for a while, put her hands together and prayed to the heavens, and continued to walk forward. Gu Xingyin heard the sound of thunder. Her body suddenly stiffened, and then she squatted down in pain. Except for her, no one else heard this sound. The heavenly Tao of this world warned her that if there was a next time, there would be no mercy. When the sudden pain in her body gradually disappeared, Gu Xingyin stood up expressionlessly. She found the so-called heavenly Tao of this world laughable. In this life, He Qing had committed countless evil deeds, but because of her so-called merits in her previous life, she was able to live a wealthy and stable life until she was old. What did that woman do wrong? Her husband cheated on her, and the woman who intervened in her marriage wanted her life. However, the heavenly Tao did not care about this. It did not even allow others to care about it. Was this the so-called fate? Gu Xingyin looked at the woman from afar, and found that the gray color on her body did not decrease. She lowered her eyes. She knew in her heart that that woman would not live past tonight. Even if she avoided the car accident, the woman would die in another accident. As expected, when it was close to dawn, the record book in Gu Xingyin's hand glowed faintly. Seeing the familiar name, Gu Xingyin pursed her lips. She walked into a small alley and saw a woman who had been stabbed several times and was lying in a pool of blood. Her soul was floating in midair, staring blankly at her own body. Your days in the human world have come to an end. Come with me. A cold voice came from beside her. The woman turned her head and saw death standing beside her. Chapter 1405. Death God. The woman looked at Gu Xingyin and guessed her identity. Gu Xingyin didn't say anything. The woman continued. Are you here to take me away? Gu Xingyin nodded. I'll take your soul to the underworld. The woman didn't say anything and prepared to leave with Gu Xingyin. There wasn't even a hint of reluctance on her face. Gu Xingyin felt a bit strange, but as a death god, she shouldn't care too much about these things. Until the door to the underworld opened and the woman was about to walk in, she suddenly smiled at her. When we were on the road, it was you, right? I sensed your presence. That cold feeling was the same as now. The woman looked at Gu Xingyin and smiled. Thank you. Gu Xingyin didn't say anything and watched the woman walk in. The expression on her face disappeared and she became silent. She suddenly felt a bit annoyed with her mission. If only she didn't know anything. But even though she knew everything, she couldn't do anything. She could only watch as the people who deserved to die lived freely, while the innocent met a tragic end because of their so-called fate. She finally understood why the death god didn't have any emotions and was cold. Only without any emotions could she coldly look at all the unfair things in the world. For the gods, a human's life, a few decades, was just a blink of an eye. And everything had a cycle. She lived a miserable life in this life, but she might be able to live a good life in the next. There was nothing to be conflicted about. But Gu Xingyin couldn't do it. She raised her head and looked at the eternal gray sky of the underworld. She actually had the urge to escape. Bing. Detected that the host has negative emotions. Please adjust your emotions as soon as possible. Please adjust your emotions as soon as possible and complete the mission with a positive heart. The system's voice sounded in her ears. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses and said calmly, I know. But no matter if I'm positive or negative, I'll just hide far away and watch He Qing live out her life in glory, right? The system. It seemed to be true, and it had nothing to say. Seeing that the system had fallen silent because of her words, Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and said, However, I can slowly observe and see what will happen to her in her next life, right? The system perked up. Yes, host. Originally, according to the merit accumulated from the mission, as long as she did not seek death, she could have lived a wealthy life for more than 3 generations. However, she had committed so many sins in her life that these merits could not even make up for her sins. In her next life, her life will definitely be very miserable. Whether or not she can be reincarnated into a human is another matter. Gu Xingyin nodded and did not say anything else. At this moment, the man and the system both thought that this world's mission would be completed just like that. However, there was nothing definite about fate. He Qing was with that man. After the man's wife died, he was depressed for a period of time. It was rare for He Qing to chase away all the women around her and put down her hobby of adventuring to focus on staying by his side. She was such a beautiful woman, and she was doing her best for him. Anyone could see that she had feelings for him. Not many men would be able to reject such luck. Chapter 1406. That man and He Qing naturally got together. Gu Xingyin watched coldly from the side. He Qing seemed to have really fallen for him this time. When she was with this man, she didn't go to places like nightclubs and send all her lovers away. She was really like an ordinary woman, accompanying that man. The two of them lived a very happy life. For some reason, looking at He Qing like this, Gu Xingyin was relieved. It was a good thing that she could settle down and stop doing evil. But one day, Gu Xingyin saw that man's name in her record book. Usually, the Grim Reaper wouldn't take the initiative to flip through the record book unless the name on it lit up. And when the name lit up, it meant that that person was about to die. That man's name hadn't lit up yet, but his name appeared on the first 3 pages of Gu Xingyin's record book. Usually, the Grim Reaper wouldn't look at the names on these pages because it was troublesome. Anyway, what they needed to do was to take those names to the underworld when they lit up. Those who were on the first 3 pages would be rotated down in order. It meant that those who were about to die were not under their control. Gu Xingyin took a look under the system's reminder and found the man's name. He had cancer. It was in the late stage. He only had 4 months left to live. Gu Xingyin almost immediately thought of He Qing's reaction. That crazy woman wouldn't do anything, would she? Her premonition was very accurate. That man said that he wasn't feeling well. At first, they thought that it was a small illness. After He Qing insisted on going to the hospital for a checkup, the results made them despair. The hospital that examined the man said that there was no way. The cancer had spread and couldn't be treated. He Qing didn't believe it. She took the man to the most famous hospitals in the country, but the results were the same. After that, they went abroad. But for such a disease, even the best hospital and the best doctor couldn't do anything. Gu Xingyin was inexplicably worried. She had known He Qing's character for so long and knew it well. If this woman really went crazy, it was terrifying. After confirming that there was no other way, the two of them returned home. Perhaps He Qing's efforts during this period of time had paid off. That man also had good feelings for her. Seeing her like this, he even comforted her. "It's okay, Qing. I'm fine now." He Qing just quietly leaned her head against the man's chest. "I won't let you die, no matter what the price is." Since there was no other way with technology, they would have to resort to extreme measures. He Qing began to visit the famous feng shui masters in the hall, to see if she could find a way to extend her life. Most of the masters didn't even want to look at her when they saw the sins she had accumulated in her life. People like them knew more about certain things, and the most taboo thing was to be tainted with karma and sin. He was also tempted by He Qing's offer, but after seeing the man's condition, he shook his head. An old man said to He Qing, "You're too late. If I had discovered it earlier, I could have thought of a way to prolong his life. But now, his name has already been recorded in the Grim Reaper's record book. There's no other way." "Grim Reaper?" He Qing asked in confusion. Wasn't that a god from the myths and legends? Did it really exist? Chapter 1407. Seeing that she was interested, the old man told He Qing some of the things he knew. After that, he shook his head and said, "Madam, you should go back and spend more time with your husband. Forgive me for not being able to help." He Qing left without saying anything. When she returned home, the man was sitting on the balcony in his home clothes, basking in the sun. The pain of his illness made his body thin rapidly. Now he was no longer as handsome as He Qing liked. If it was in the past, He Qing would have given up on such a lover. But this person was different. She was obsessed with him like crazy and wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. The Grim Reaper? In this world, there was nothing that money could not buy. In just a few days, some information about the Grim Reaper appeared in front of her. He Qing read word by word and finally understood what those masters meant. Those who were on the Grim Reaper's record book were destined to die. No one could save such a person, unless the Grim Reaper was willing to go against the heavenly Tao for him. However, the Grim Reaper was a god who walked between the human world and the underworld. She had always been selfless. How could she go against the heavenly Tao for an ordinary human? Yi Qing was in despair for a moment. But she wanted to see the so-called Grim Reaper. Once again, she disturbed the master and voiced out her thoughts. You want to see the Grim Reaper? The master's expression changed. What a joke. What did the Grim Reaper represent? A living person would not see the Grim Reaper. This was the rule for thousands of years. He felt that he had not lived long enough. Yi Qing was not surprised at the master's rejection. She smiled coldly and said, Master Du, your grandson who is in kindergarten is playing in my house now. He is waiting for Grandpa to bring him home. Master Du's expression changed when he heard that. In his line of work, it had always been difficult to have children. His grandson was the only son left behind by his son who had an accident. Yi Qing threatened him with this, and he had no room to reject her. Master Du regretted it now. Yi Qing was a lunatic. He should have rejected her when she came to find him. But it was too late now. She had her eyes on him. Master Du said coldly, In that case I'll go with you. Yi Qing smiled. Thank you, Master Du. When I meet the Grim Reaper, I will naturally send your grandson back. Master Du said in a deep voice, But let me make it clear first. A living person can't see the Grim Reaper. Madam He, don't lose your luck. Furthermore, this old man can only give it a try. Whether or not the Grim Reaper is willing to show himself, this old man cannot guarantee. Yi Qing was non-committal and said faintly, Master Du doesn't need to worry about this. She didn't know that her every move had long been known by others. Gu Xingyin had no intention of meeting her at all. She thought for a moment. It had been a few months since she last saw Qiao Zhihe. She wondered how little Crane was doing. Qiao Zhihe was painting in his room. Now he was already 17 years old. His figure had already matured, and his handsome face always carried a faint smile. Anyone who saw him would praise him for being such a handsome child. At this moment, a delicate rose was blooming under his brush. The flower was as red as fire, and its unrestrained passion seemed to pour out from the paper. Chapter 1408. The young master of the Qiao family didn't study financial management, but chose art. When Qiao Zhihe said his intention, he was opposed by his family. But in the end, Father Qiao and Mother Qiao couldn't persuade their son. It was useless to force them, as long as their son was happy. A gust of cold wind came from the open window, and Qiao Zhihe's gentle eyes showed a touch of surprise. Death Sister. Sure enough, when he turned around, a familiar figure appeared in his room. He had always called her Death Sister, because he once asked Gu Xingyin for her name, but Gu Xingyin didn't tell him. The name of a god was like a spell, and must not be told to others easily. But Gu Xingyin didn't tell Qiao Zhihe, because she didn't know the name of the original body. The original body seemed to be the death god from the beginning of her memories, and humans also called her Death God. She didn't have a name. Naturally, she couldn't tell Qiao Zhihe what her name was. Gu Xingyin looked at the cluster of gorgeous roses on the drawing paper and praised. Very beautiful. Qiao Zhihe heard this and laughed. Gu Xingyin looked at him and wanted to say something, but suddenly her face changed. She seemed to see something on Qiao Zhihe's body. Her heart moved, and the record book in her hand automatically flipped. And on the third page, the 3 words Qiao Zhihe appeared. How could this be? Gu Xingyin stared at the name on the book, and her heart was full of confusion and shock. Death Sister? Death Sister? Qiao Zhihe called her several times before she came back to her senses. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses and saw Qiao Zhihe. For a moment, she didn't want to face this lively face. She hurriedly said, Something came up. See you next time. Before her voice fell, she had already disappeared from the room. Qiao Zhihe's smile froze on his face. The corners of his lips slowly relaxed, and he felt his heart suddenly become empty. She was a god, and he was a mortal. That was someone she would never be able to catch in her life. Qiao Zhihe slowly returned to the front of the table and picked up the brush again. He slowly added the remaining colors to the flame-like roses. It was just that the enthusiasm that seemed to surge out seemed to have faded a lot. Gu Xingyin flew to the top of the mountain alone. She moved her left hand and finally flipped open the record book. She clearly saw a line of words on it. Qiao Zhihe, male, 17 years old, died in a car accident on July 14, 2330. The 14th of July, the day when the gates of hell would open, was just 2 months away. Why couldn't she understand? Why was there no news about Xiao Zhihe in her record book? Why did such words suddenly appear? It was impossible for the Grim Reaper's record book to be wrong. That was, Xiao Zhihe would indeed die in 2 months. Gu Xingyin sat at the top of the mountain for an entire night. The next day, she became the cold Grim Reaper again. The system said, "Host, don't be sad." Gu Xingyin felt strange and asked, "Why would I be sad?" The system said, "Your lover is about to die in this world, but host, you will meet again in the next world, so..." Gu Xingyin continued the system's words. "So I'm not sad, don't worry." The system didn't say anything else. Even if they were lovers, if the child they watched grow up was about to die, they would also feel uncomfortable, right? Was she really not sad? Not necessarily, right? Chapter 1409. After a few days, Gu Xingyin went to see Xiao Zhihe again. The 17-year-old little Nian wore a white shirt. He was so clean that he looked like a handsome young man from a manga. When he saw Gu Xingyin, Xiao Zhihe was delighted. He showed his latest painting to Gu Xingyin. It was a bunch of sunflowers that bloomed in the sun. Gu Xingyin looked at the painting for a long time. Xiao Zhihe's painting looked a little different from his person. No matter who saw this young man, they would think that he was the kind of gentleman described in the books. But in his painting, there was no such temperament at all. Instead, it was very passionate and unrestrained, as if he was always pursuing something tirelessly. He was a very talented painter. Not only Gu Xingyin thought so, but many old seniors in the painting world also thought highly of this young junior. Even Xiao Zhihe's parents, after seeing the talent that their son showed, never asked him to go into business again. Such a pure artistic soul was born to paint. "It's a beautiful painting," Gu Xingyin praised. Xiao Zhihe heard his praise, and his eyes showed a deep smile. Gu Xingyin turned to look at him. The young man had a vibrant smile, and his smile could easily infect others. She suddenly had a desire to confide in him. "Little he, do you want to take a walk in the mountains with me?" she asked. Xiao Zhihe nodded. In fact, as long as he was with Sister Death, he was willing to go anywhere. Gu Xingyin reached out to him. Xiao Zhihe's eyebrows trembled, and then he reached out his slender hand and gently put it on the black glove. A cold feeling passed through the glove. Sister Death's body was always so cold, just like. Xiao Zhihe turned his head and looked at Death, who was always hidden in the hood. It was as if Sister Death's entire divine spirit gave people the feeling. His body flew up lightly. Xiao Zhihe floated in the void and looked at the lights below his feet. He was no stranger to such experiences. But no matter how many times he experienced it, he still held the same anticipation and joy. Because it was only at this time that he could get so close to Sister Death. Gu Xingyin really took him to a mountain. On a summer night, the heat of the day had faded away. Coupled with the cool breeze at the top of the mountain, it was very refreshing. Xiao Zhihe looked around. It was very dark, and the only light was the brilliant lights in the distance. That was the city he lived in. From such a distance, he could only see an endless belt of light. Seeing him subconsciously approach her, Gu Xingyin thought that Xiao Zhihe did not dare to approach her because it was too dark. She thought for a moment, and her divine sense moved slightly. In an instant, countless tiny specks of light rose from the forest and wandered around the two of them. Although these lights were weak, when combined together, they still illuminated the place. Xiao Zhihe's eyes widened. He looked at the sky full of fireflies in shock, and was speechless for a long time. He had never seen such a beautiful scene. He turned sideways and saw that the cloak on the head of the person beside him had been taken off, and the black sickle in her hand had disappeared without a trace. Sister Death. His face was a little red. But Gu Xingyin only thought that he was excited because of the beautiful scene in front of him. 8 o'clock. It's the end of the month, the last 3 days of the month. If you have votes, please vote for Gao Lingji. Gao Lingji is currently 5th in the monthly votes, only 6 or 7 votes away from 6th. Chapter 1410. She knew very well that those in the art industry were obsessed with the pursuit of beauty. When Xiao Zhihe saw Gu Xingyin's face, The surging emotions in his heart were knocked back by a basin of cold water. Seeing that the other party did not ask him, he took back the words that were about to come out of his mouth. The two sat quietly like this, with the dancing fireflies beside them. When they looked up, there were bright stars. Gu Xingyin suddenly fell back and lay in the grass. Xiao Zhihe looked at her with some surprise. In his mind, Sister Death's words and deeds were like the most rigorous dogma training. Every move, even the posture of standing, was very strict. This was the first time he had seen her act so carelessly. But at the same time, a secret delight rose in his heart because of this. Sister Grim Reaper seemed to be more humane like this. He imitated Gu Xingyin's action, using his hands as a pillow and lying down on the grass. Looking at the sky like this, it was completely impossible to distinguish which were fireflies and which were stars. Gu Xingyin suddenly spoke. I don't remember how many years I have been deaf, and I don't remember how many souls have entered the underworld from my hands. Xiao Zhihe did not understand what she wanted to express, but he could see that Gu Xingyin wanted to talk to someone. Therefore, he did not interrupt or ask any questions. Instead, he listened to her quietly. Gu Xingyin's cold voice was like a clear spring flowing slowly in such a summer night, which could easily soothe the last trace of heat in people's hearts. You are the only one who can see me as a living person. Xiao Zhihe couldn't help but smile. To Sister Death, he was also a very special existence. This recognition made him very happy. I have seen all kinds of people facing death. Little Crane, let me ask you a question. Xiao Zhihe focused his attention. What's the question, Sister Death? Gu Xingyin heard her own calm voice. If you knew that you were about to die one day, what would you think? Her voice was too calm. So calm that it made Xiao Zhihe think that she really just wanted to ask a question on a whim. He thought about it very seriously and finally said, I might be very unwilling, right? Gu Xingyin repeated. Unwilling? Yeah. Xiao Zhihe smiled and said, I'm only 17 years old. My dream is to become a famous painter. I've just started walking on this path, and I haven't proven to my parents that I've made the right choice. My parents only have one son, and if I die, they will be very sad. I haven't. He suddenly stopped talking. Finally, he said, I still want to live for a long, long time. Gu Xingyin just listened quietly. She heard that Xiao Zhihe still had some unfinished words, but that should be a little secret of a teenager, so she did not ask. Xiao Zhihe softly said the words that he didn't say out loud in his heart. I haven't confessed to the person I like yet, and I probably won't confess to her either. But I will try my best to live for a long, long time so that I can spend more time with her. Gu Xingyin turned her head and looked at the young man's bright eyes under the light of the fireflies, which were full of vigor and vitality. Such a young man's life would end in 2 months. Chapter 14:11. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt uncomfortable. She stood up irritably and said, Shall I send you back? Xiao Zhihe listened to her cold voice and watched her put on the hood again. He was disappointed. He felt that it was rare to see Sister Death like that. Now, she had become cold and unapproachable. Gu Xingyin sent Xiao Zhihe home. She did not talk to the young man as she felt that she could not bear to see his bright eyes again. He Qing was almost done with her preparations. Master Du had already set up the altar and prepared the offerings for the Grim Reaper. He put on his robe and lit 3 incense sticks before he started to chant. He Qing stood aside quietly. She did not understand what Master Du was chanting and she did not care about it. All she wanted was a result. A strong wind blew in the night and extinguished the incense sticks in Master Du's hands. Master Du lit the incense sticks again and continued to chant. This time, the wind that blew from the void was even stronger, blowing the offerings to the ground. Master Du's expression changed completely. He respectfully bowed 3 times to the altar before walking in front of He Qing. Madam He, as you can see, Death doesn't want to see you. Although He Qing did not know what happened, she saw the offerings being blown away by the strange wind. She said coldly, Death doesn't want to see me? Master Du did not say anything. He had made it very obvious. He Qing's expression changed as she thought of her lover, who could not stand up anymore. When she thought about how he would leave her soon, He Qing felt that she could not bear it. She suddenly sneered. She doesn't want to see me? Isn't death supposed to pick up the dead? Then I'll ask her to pick you up. She waved her hand behind her, and a few well-built men dragged a person forward. This person was a homeless man she had found by the roadside. Master Du had already guessed He Qing's plan. His expression changed, and he looked at He Qing as if she was a lunatic. Madam He, this is a great sin. You can't do it. You'll have to pay for it in your next life. He Qing turned a deaf ear. Sin. Haven't I, He Qing, committed enough sins in my life? If you want to pay me back in your next life, then we'll talk about it in your next life. I don't care what happens in the next life, but in this life, I can't lose him. Master Du looked at the crazy woman, and regretted for the umpteenth time in his heart. Why did he set foot on this pirate ship? Now his heart was filled with despair. In this matter he was in cahoots with He Qing. When the heavenly Tao came to settle the score, he would not be able to escape. He closed his eyes, not wanting to see what was about to happen. He couldn't stop her. He knew that if he didn't cooperate with He Qing, this crazy woman would really hurt his grandson. When Gu Xingyin saw the notebook light up and saw the locations and people displayed on it, a huge flame of anger rose in his heart. He Qing. She actually dared to do that. He Qing coldly looked at the person who had fallen to the ground and was no longer breathing. Fresh blood flowed out from his body and meandered to her feet like an evil yet beautiful chain. Suddenly, a strong wind blew in the quiet darkness, and the altar for death was blown to the ground. Master Du's face was filled with despair. Death is angry. Chapter 14:12. He Qing still looked indifferent, but the gun in her sleeve had its safety off, showing that she wasn't as calm as she appeared to be. A black figure appeared in the night sky. She was wearing a large black cloak and her face could not be seen clearly. The huge black scythe exuded a chilling aura under the moonlight. It was a summer night, but everyone felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Master Du, the only one who could see her, knelt down immediately. He Qing guessed that the Grim Reaper had arrived from the reaction of the people around and Master Du's appearance. However, she could not see anything. She said loudly, "Death God, are you here, Death God?" The surroundings were silent. Even the bodyguards that He Qing brought along were all tall and strong. They were all like little quails at this moment. They could not wait to curl up into a ball and shiver. They only found a normal job as bodyguards. They did not say that they would have to face such a supernatural event. No one answered He Qing. He Qing suddenly walked towards Master Du. "Master Du, you have a way to see the Grim Reaper, right? Think of a way to let me see him too." He Qing said softly. Master Du shook his head in fear, and did not dare to speak, because he could see that the Grim Reaper had appeared behind He Qing. However, He Qing did not know anything. She even took out her gun and pointed it at Master Du. "Quick. Otherwise I'll send you to see him." "Let her see." Master Du was shivering when a cold female voice rang in his ears. If Master Du were to describe this voice, it would probably be like quenched ice. It would make people shiver uncontrollably. It turned out that the Grim Reaper was a female. Master Du thought in a daze and was shocked. He quickly opened his eyes and took out a yellow talisman paper from his arms. Then, he bit his middle finger and drew a mysterious rune on it. When the rune was formed, He Qing did not know if it was an illusion, but she felt that she seemed to see a golden light on it. Then Master Du took the rune and stuck it on He Qing's eyes. When the rune came into contact with He Qing's eyes, it suddenly seemed to merge into her eyes and disappeared. At the same time, He Qing realized that the world in her eyes had changed. She turned around and was shocked by the figure in front of her. A dark figure exuding an eerie cold aura was standing very close to him. Subconsciously, He Qing took a few steps back. She looked at the figure in front of her. His appearance was exactly the same as the legendary death of the underworld. Behind her, the homeless man who had just died was looking at her with hatred. It was his soul. No matter how bold He Qing was, she was still a little fearful after encountering such a situation. But she didn't show it on her face. She looked at Gu Xingyin. "Are you the Grim Reaper? I want to ask you to do something for me. You can pay any price you want." She could see death, but her bodyguards couldn't. They looked at their boss speaking to the void with a serious face. If it were any other time, they would definitely find this scene a little funny, but at this moment, no one could laugh. Because it was truly terrifying. Gu Xingyin looked at He Qing coldly. He Qing only felt that the icy gaze was like an icicle, about to freeze her. Chapter 14:13. Then He Qing heard an extremely cold voice coming from the opposite side. Human, what right do you have to say such things? It was an undisguised contempt, as if the other party was talking to an insignificant ant. Because of her family background and wealth, He Qing had never met anyone who dared to speak to her in such a manner. She instinctively felt displeased, but when she thought of the other party's identity, she suppressed her unwillingness. Yes, the other party was a deity. Everything she had was nothing in front of the other party. The deity's power was too strong. He Qing felt suffocated and regretted her decision to sit down for a moment. But the next moment, she thought of the man's weak appearance and her heart hardened again. She stared straight at Gu Xingyin. Then I won't beg you. How about I threaten you directly? If you don't agree, I'll kill one person a day. Master Du almost fainted when he heard these words. How dare she say such things? Was she really not afraid of retribution? He Qing sneered. I've looked for countless masters to tell my fortune. In this life, my destiny is extremely rich and I'll live a long life. So what if I kill someone in front of you? The Grim Reaper can't do anything to me, right? She had made a lot of preparations during this period. At least she knew that her life was extremely good, so no matter what happened, she would be able to turn misfortunes into blessings. This was because she was protected by the golden light of merit. For someone like her, even a deity would not dare to go against the heavenly Tao and do anything to her. This was also the reason why she was so fearless. As for the next life, she had once thought that her next life might be very miserable. But what did it matter? She was only He Qing in this life. It was enough for her to live well in this life. Who would care about the next life? Gu Xingyin said. Your merit in this life is accumulated from the good deeds you did in your previous life. Why do you not care about the good fortune? She did not seem to care about He Qing's threat at all. He Qing naturally heard it and said impatiently, What I want to do is my own business. You just have to promise me that you won't let him die. Master Du deeply regretted that he had said those words when He Qing came to find him. He Qing's actions were simply courting death. The Grim Reaper couldn't do anything to her in this life, but what about after she died? After her death, her soul would belong to the underworld. At that time, if the Grim Reaper wanted to deal with her, it would be a piece of cake. Gu Xingyin looked at her and said, Life has its own destiny. No one can save him. He Qing said sternly, You're lying. Master Du said that as long as you're willing, you don't have to take away his soul. Master Du could feel the cold gaze on him. He could not help but shrink back. At this moment, he was already thinking about how he would die and come back to life after falling into the underworld. Gu Xingyin did not even look at He Qing. She turned and left. Life and death have their own destiny. The heavens will not spare anyone. Her meaning was clear. She couldn't save him. Even if she could not risk being punished by the heavens to save him. He Qing's heart hardened. She pulled the trigger and shot directly at Gu Xingyin. This time, Master Du fainted directly. However, in He Qing's eyes, those bullets passed through the Grim Reaper's body and hit the opposite wall. The other party did not even want to lower himself to her level and disappeared in an instant. Chapter 14:14. He Qing felt despair. For the first time, she felt powerless. But she wasn't the only one. As the Grim Reaper, Gu Xingyin couldn't do anything when she saw Qiao Zhihe's death approaching. The only thing Gu Xingyin could do was to spend more time with Qiao Zhihe in the last 2 months. Every time she went to see Qiao Zhihe, she could see his happy smile. She thought that she should be Qiao Zhihe's best friend in this life. Qiao Zhihe wasn't introverted, but he tended to be quiet. When he had nothing to do, he would travel alone with his drawing board to find inspiration. From Gu Xingyin's observation, she was likely to be one of Qiao Zhihe's best friends. Sometimes Gu Xingyin would look at him from afar without showing herself. She watched him draw for free on this drawing board in the square, where there were many children and adults' windmills. But he never drew portraits. Gu Xingyin saw that he had studied portraits for so many years, but she had never seen him draw portraits except for the copies in the classroom. Some people said that portraits were Qiao Zhihe's shortcoming. He knew that he wasn't good at it, so he never touched it. But Gu Xingyin didn't think so. Perhaps in her eyes, her family members were always the best. She felt that Qiao Zhihe must have his reasons for not drawing portraits. It wasn't that he couldn't draw well. Another month passed. There was still a month before Qiao Zhihe's death. And that man's condition was getting worse. He Qing's patience seemed to have reached its limit. People started to die in the city. It wasn't an accident. The murderer didn't have a target. It seemed that he would kill when he wanted to. There wasn't a high level of modus operandi, but the police couldn't find the murderer. Every time they investigated a case, they couldn't find any key clues. It was as if something had erased those clues from their minds. Gu Xingyin felt a chill in her heart. Because of He Qing's fate, she couldn't die. She couldn't be imprisoned. She couldn't be caught. What about others? Those who were waiting for a hot meal after work died innocently in He Qing's hands. Yes, those names were recorded in Gu Xingyin's record book. It showed that their lifespans ended on that day. Gu Xingyin might be able to comfort herself that even without He Qing's actions, they might still have died from a fall or a car accident. However, Gu Xingyin found it ridiculous. No matter how she looked at it, those people seemed to be paying for something. This was because Gu Xingyin had clearly seen the changes in He Qing's record book when she made her move. Some people's fates changed with her actions. The power of virtue in He Qing's body was also slowly decreasing. However, at this rate, she could still be free and unfettered for countless years before the golden light of virtue disappeared. Over the course of countless years, who knew how many more souls would have died under her hands? The most hateful thing was that every time He Qing killed a person, she would arrogantly write a sentence with blood. Salute to the Grim Reaper. The police thought that it was a declaration made by the criminal. They thought that it was a provocation to the police. But it wasn't. It was He Qing's provocation to the Grim Reaper. On this day when Gu Xingyin went to visit Qiao Zhihe, she saw him sitting on the bed alone. Chapter 14-15. Even when he saw Gu Xingyin's arrival, he didn't show much joy. Sister Death, you can see a person's lifespan, right? Qiao Zhihe asked. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat, but she nodded lightly. Qiao Zhihe's face showed a dazed expression. One of my senior brothers, a very talented person. He had already received an admission notice from Songlin Country's Royal Academy this year, but when he returned home last night, he was shot. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. She knew that boy. She had gone to fetch him last night. The very cheerful and bright young man was beside her, crying as he looked at his own body. She had asked him to take a look at his parents. That person kept crying that he was unfilial, and that he had let down his parents. Gu Xingyin looked at the record book in her hand. Actually, that person shouldn't have died yesterday. Originally, he should have gone abroad to study, then returned to his country and become a somewhat famous modern artist. He should have died at the age of 40 from liver cancer. But He Qing made a move. Just like she said, she would kill one person a day without a goal until the death god compromised. The power of merit in her body was protecting her. Every time she killed someone, her merit would decrease by 1. The power of merit that was originally enough to protect her in this lifetime was slowly decreasing. According to her current squandering, it was very likely that it could only protect her for 3 more years. But in 3 years, how many people would die by her hands? Gu Xingyin didn't reflect on the underworld. But in the eyes of the underworld's gods, all of this was nothing. In the lives of mortals, even if this lifetime was over, there would still be a next lifetime. In their eyes, this He Qing was so arrogant now. After she died, she would naturally pay back all the sins on her body. And for those who died by her hands and didn't get to enjoy their lives, the heavenly Tao would naturally compensate them in the next lifetime. So this was all a cycle. In the hearts of the gods who didn't have emotions and desires, this wasn't a big deal. But Gu Xingyin couldn't bear it. She came to see Qiao Zhihe today to say goodbye to him. Then Big Sister Death, my parents. How long can they live? Qiao Zhihe was silent for a long time before he asked carefully. Gu Xingyin paused for a moment before replying. The lifespan of a mortal is a heavenly secret. It cannot be revealed casually. Xiao Zhihe was somewhat disappointed. Gu Xingyin thought of what she was going to do and said to Xiao Zhihe, "Don't think too much. Your parents are kind people. They will have a happy life." Xiao Zhihe's eyes lit up. Gu Xingyin looked into his eyes and her expression softened. But Xiao Zhihe couldn't see it. He could only hear the other party saying softly, "You too, little crane. You will become a very famous painter and live a peaceful and wealthy life." Gu Xingyin suddenly stood up and said to Xiao Zhihe, "I will be staying in the underworld for a long time. I have some things to take care of, so I won't be back for a long time." Xiao Zhihe was a bit disappointed, but he still nodded. He always knew that he and Big Sister Death were people from two different worlds. He looked at the other party's back. A pair of magnificent black wings stretched out, and she disappeared into the darkness. He didn't know that this would be the last time he saw her in this life. Chapter 14:16. "Host, have you really thought it through?" the system asked. Gu Xingyin smiled and said, "Of course." She paused for a moment and said, "I guess I can't be a qualified god anymore. I can't watch those living humans die. Even if they have reincarnation and afterlife, they won't be the same person in this life, right?" The system said, "Host, not all gods are like this. It's just that in this world, even the heavenly axiom isn't perfect." The system only dared to say something like this because it was outside the rules. Otherwise, it would definitely be noticed by the heavenly axiom. Gu Xingyin looked at the unchanging sky of the underworld and said to the system, "I'm sorry." She knew that her decision was a little capricious. The mission in this world wasn't difficult, but she didn't know if the mission could be considered completed. The system comforted her. "It's okay, host. As long as you're happy." Gu Xingyin. She didn't know why, but the originally serious atmosphere made her feel like laughing because of the system's comforting words. She thought that the system she met was probably the most tolerant, gentle, and good-tempered system in the world. She chose a place. Yes, it was in the underworld, under the tree where she often sat in a daze. The fiery red maple tree rustled, and 2 leaves fell on her shoulders. The red and black contrasted with each other, creating a stunning beauty. Gu Xingyin had already closed her eyes. She placed her hand on the record book in her hand. Her spiritual power entered a very mysterious space through the record book. It was a void, and the darkness was filled with threads of light of all sizes. Some of these threads were thick, some thin, and all of them had different colors. This was the light of destiny of everyone in the record book. Gu Xingyin casually picked up a thread, and a string of information flowed into her mind. Lu Yuan, male, lived a mediocre life, died at the age of 58. She casually let go of the thread and released her spiritual power. She began to search for her target among the thousands of threads. Found it. She focused her gaze, and an illusory giant palm of light behind her grabbed into the darkness. When it came out, there were 2 more threads of light in its hand. There was a huge difference between the 2 rays of light. A very weak blue light flashed. The light was very dim, as if it could be extinguished at any moment. The other was an extremely thick and dazzling golden beam of light. The golden light made many of the surrounding thin threads dim. The owners of these 2 rays of light were called Xiao Zhihe and He Qing. What Gu Xingyin wanted to do today was to defy the will of the heavens. Didn't He Qing use her golden light of virtue to do whatever she wanted? Then she would take away her merit, and see what else she could rely on to show off. As for Xiao Zhihe, in any case, she had already defied the mandate of heaven. It was impossible for her to escape the punishment of the heavenly Tao. In that case, it wouldn't be a big deal to defy it one more time. She held the 2 rays of light in her left and right hands, and then a powerful force began to seep into their fates bit by bit. It was not difficult for Xiao Zhihe to do so. Gu Xingyin did not spend much effort to erase the fate inscription on it. However, it was very troublesome for He Qing. Gu Xingyin could even feel that after her spiritual power entered He Qing's light of destiny, it was as if she had fallen into a swamp. It was very difficult for her to move forward. Chapter 14:17. Gu Xingyin knew that it was the merit that was stopping her from moving forward. In fact, the heavenly axiom was involved as well. Deep within her soul, she could hear the rumbling of thunder. That was the heavenly Tao's doing to stop her. However, she had already come this far. How could Gu Xingyin give up? She gave a cold harumph, and a soul power that was even stronger than that of the Grim Reaper burst forth, destroying all obstructions like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. She forcefully erased the mark on the light of destiny. It was a power that belonged to her own soul. Then she wrote a new mark on the golden pillar of light word by word. Qiao Zhihe, male, famous painter. Wealthy and peaceful for life, died at age 80. On the other thin line, He Qing's name appeared. He Qing, female, committed countless evil deeds, died at age 31. Gu Xingyin was practically forced out. She looked at the sky above her. The sky of the netherworld, which had always been calm and cold, was filled with dark clouds and thunder. It was as though something was erupting with a powerful rage. Gu Xingyin knew that the heavenly Tao was angry. However, what did that matter? Didn't the heavenly Tao only recognize fate? She had already done what she wanted to do. Fresh blood trickled down from the corners of her mouth. It was as though a raging fire was burning within her body. It was also as though a cold winter wind was slicing her internal organs. That was the heavenly Tao punishing the Grim Reaper for daring to defy it. Gu Xingyin sensed her life force and power flowing away rapidly. She closed her eyes in exhaustion. System, leave this world. At the same time, Qiao Zhihe and He Qing both sensed that something was amiss. It was as though something had quietly left their bodies. Qiao Zhihe looked at the drop of red paint on the drawing paper and pursed his lips. Then he threw the drawing, which was almost completed, into the wastepaper basket. He Qing, who was standing guard before the man's window, received a call from the police. Without the power of merit, her crude methods of committing crimes could not be concealed. He Qing was taken away by the police. But before they could interrogate him, the police car carrying the most important suspect in the serial murder case was involved in a car accident. The most surprising thing was that the police officers in the car were only hurt by love, but the female suspect died on the spot. Later, the evidence was conclusive. Those cases were all committed by this woman. When the public found out about it, they all said that this was retribution. This person had committed too many sins. Even the heavens could not bear to watch anymore. Qiao Zhihe also saw the news. When he saw it, the first thing he thought of was to share it with Sister Death. But he hadn't seen Sister Death in a long time. Sister Death said that she had something important to do in the underworld, and would not be back for a long time. But how long would it take? It was the 14th of July, the day when the gates of hell would open. However, very few people in the city believed this person. The light turned green. Qiao Zhihe was walking on the sidewalk. He was going to the paint shop across the street to buy a few boxes of his usual pigments. He turned around and saw that a car's brakes seemed to have malfunctioned. The car was speeding toward him at a speed that he could not avoid. It's over. At that moment, he was thinking that he would be able to see Sister Death. But for some unknown reason, just as the car was about to make contact with him, the car's tires suddenly skidded. It made a turn and charged toward the green belt beside him. Qiao Zhihe was not hurt at all. However, when he looked at the car, he felt as if something had left his body for a moment. 8 o'clock. There will be more in this world. Good night, everyone. Chapter 14:18. The driver was also fine. When he climbed out of the car and saw the unscathed Qiao Zhihe, his expression was as if he was about to cry. He was scared half to death just now. If he ran the red light and killed someone, he would have no hope in this life. Fortunately, God protected him. He ignored Qiao Zhihe's refusal and stuffed a large sum of money into his mouth, saying that if Qiao Zhihe didn't accept it, his heart would feel uneasy. Qiao Zhihe finally accepted the money and put this matter to the back of his mind. Many years later, Qiao Zhihe became a very famous painter. He was very young, didn't have any bad habits, and kept himself clean. He also had a face that could be called a male god. Most importantly, he didn't have a girlfriend. Such a man was simply the dream lover of countless women. His paintings could be sold for a very high price, but still, no one had ever seen him paint any portraits. His competitors attacked him, and his admirers offered him tens of millions of dollars to paint his portrait, but he never paid any attention to them. No one knew that in his villa, there was a room that only he could open. When the light was turned on, one could see a full easel. The contents of these easels, at a glance, could be seen to be the same person. Black cloak, black scythe, unable to see the face clearly. This image was the majority, and a few of the portraits had a delicate beauty, but her hair and pupil color were somewhat different from humans. In a few of the portraits, this person even had a pair of gorgeous black wings on her body. These portraits were vivid and lifelike. The movements and expressions of the people in the portraits, and even the eyes, seemed to be transmitted through the painting paper. As long as one saw these paintings, one would know that the famous painter Qiao Zhihe was not good at painting people. It was absolutely nonsense. The level of these paintings even surpassed several of his works that were sold for sky-high prices. Qiao Zhihe stretched out his hand and gently stroked a painting. His movements were very gentle, so gentle that it was as if he wasn't stroking a painting at all, but the owner of the painting. Death Sister. Qiao Zhihe, who had grown into a mature man, softly called her. 11 years, 3 months and 13 days. You said that you had things to do and wouldn't come for a long time. But that's really too long. He looked at the paintings with a gentle gaze. Actually, I decided to draw because of you. I want to draw your appearance, and your movements. Everything is on the drawing board. Of course, only I could see it. The first person I want to draw is you. That's why before I have absolute confidence, I've never drawn a portrait because I'm afraid that the work I draw will tarnish your image. Now, I'm able to draw something that satisfies me. I want to show you my work. But Sister Death, why don't you come back and see me? Since 11 years ago, no, since before that. In his heart, he had been thinking that when he could draw her perfectly, he would bring his work to confess to her. He was a painter, so he confessed in the form of a painter. He infused all his emotions and desires into these paintings. One only needed to take a look to know how much affection he had for the people on it. Chapter 14:19. It was just that he had painstakingly studied the art of painting, and when he finally felt that he could show it off, the person who watched him painting was no longer there. Qiao Zhihe stayed in the room alone for a long time. This was his habit. He would probably stay here alone for a while every week. Finally, he sighed softly, locked the door again and went out. The weather this afternoon was very good. Qiao Zhihe put on his hat and went out with his drawing board. He planned to go to a famous lake view park in the city today, hoping to find some inspiration. It wasn't the weekend and it was the afternoon, so there weren't many people in the park. Qiao Zhihe had just sat down when an old man beside him said, "Young man, are you interested in having your fortune told?" Only then did Qiao Zhihe notice that there was a white cloth at the old man's feet. On it was written Divine Fortune Telling. However, he didn't believe in such things, so he shook his head and refused. The old man looked at him and didn't force him. Another half an hour passed, but no one came over. Perhaps the old man felt bored, so he said, "Young man, since I have nothing to do, how about I tell your fortune for you?" He seemed to be afraid that Qiao Zhihe would refuse, so he said, "This old man is just bored today, so I came out for a walk. It's fate that I met you, so I won't take your fortune-telling fee." Qiao Zhihe felt that it wasn't good to disappoint an old man who had called him twice, so he put down the pen in his hand and walked in front of the old man. "Do I need to do anything?" he asked. The old man shook his head and looked at him carefully. With this look he frowned. The glabella is connected to the glabella, but the chi is scattered and not gathered. This is clearly the sign of a short life. That's not right. He looked at Qiao Zhihe as if he had seen something extremely rare. Qiao Zhihe felt a little uncomfortable being looked at like this, so he asked what was wrong. The old man looked at him and said, "Looking at your face, it's clearly the sign of a short life. However, I don't know which powerful person went against the heavenly Tao and changed your fate, forcibly changing your fate to one of good fortune and longevity. Moreover, this fate was clearly taken from someone else. However, this young man didn't have any evil creatures on him, which meant that the person who took it wasn't a good person. When Xiao Jiha heard his words, he was a little unhappy. He took out a stack of money from his wallet and handed it to the old man. Old man, since you're a fortune teller, it's better to say something auspicious. Otherwise. As soon as the old man heard this, he knew what he was thinking. It was obvious that he didn't trust him. He didn't take Xiao Jiha's money either. He coldly snorted and said, "Young man, do you think I'm a swindler who only knows how to run his mouth? According to what I've seen, when you were 17 years old, there was a great calamity in your life that should have taken your life. It should be the middle of July when the yin qi is at its heaviest. Think about it. Did you encounter something thrilling but didn't lose your life?" Hearing the old man's words, Xiao Jiha seemed to recall the time when he was almost hit by a car. In his heart, he was already starting to believe it. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? Looking at his expression, the old man knew that he had guessed correctly. He continued, "I don't know what kind of person would actually risk being punished by the heavenly Tao to defy the heavens and change your fate. This old man is sincerely convinced by such means." Chapter 14:20. When Xiao Jiha heard this, his heart trembled for some reason. "Old sir, is it very difficult to change one's fate against the heavens?" he asked. The old man looked at him and said, "Is it? Changing a person's innate fate into another, allowing a person who was supposed to be dead to live again, and live a better life than most people. Do you think it's difficult?" After that, he said to himself, "Huaxiao is really full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. I used to think that I was already one of the best, but I didn't expect there to be such a master. This is simply a supernatural power. What a ghostly divine ability." Xiao Jiha's body shook. He suddenly remembered that one night many years ago, Sister Death brought him to the top of a mountain. There, he saw the most beautiful night scene in his life. At that time, Sister Death asked him, "If you knew that you were going to die one day, what would you think?" How did he answer at that time? He said that he was not reconciled. He remembered that she didn't say anything at that time. A few days later, she told him, "You will become a very famous painter and live a peaceful and rich life." Why didn't he think about it at that time? If there was really nothing, why would Sister Death suddenly ask such a question and emphasize such words? At this time, the old man opposite him asked, "Young man, do you know the master who changed your fate? Can you introduce me to such a master? I must pay him a visit." "Wait, no. After doing such a thing, the heavenly axiom will not let him go. The heavenly axiom will not let him go." This sentence was like a thunderbolt, ringing in Xiao Jiha's mind. He heard his own dry voice. "Sir, if I forcefully change my fate, that person, what will happen to him?" Xiao Jiha thought that his face must be very ugly now, because the old man opposite him looked at him with sympathy and worry. He said, "Changing your fate against the heavenly axiom will destroy all your cultivation and become disabled. In the worst case, you will be turned into ashes." Xiao Jiha's vision went dark. "I have something very important to do in the underworld. I may not come to see you for a long time." So, the so-called important matter was actually like this? Xiao Jiha did not ask what would happen if the one who changed someone's fate was not a human, but a god of death. He was afraid of hearing the consequences that he didn't want to hear. With a dazed expression, he packed up his things and walked back. Do not ask, do not listen. In that case, he could treat it as if Sister Death had only received some punishment, and she had only returned to the underworld to recuperate or do something else. As long as he waited patiently, he would be able to wait for her. He did not see the pitiful gaze of the old man behind him. In his entire life, Xiao Jiha had never met the person he was waiting for. Just like what Sister Death had said, he lived a peaceful, prosperous, and healthy life. His life had been smooth sailing. The only thing that puzzled people was that he had never married. It was not strange for an artist not to be married, but what was strange was that this master of the painting world did not even have a confidant in his life. On Xiao Jiha's 79th birthday, he seemed to have sensed something and held an art exhibition. This art exhibition caused a sensation in the entire painting world, because this was Master Xiao Jiha's only portrait art exhibition, and the theme of the art exhibition was only one person. Countless portraits of the god of death filled the art exhibition hall, but no one felt that it was gloomy or terrifying. Under the painting of this master, the god of death had an exquisite and perfect face. Although the expression was cold, deep in the eyes, there was a warmth and gentleness that belonged only to him. Even people who did not understand painting could see the feelings of the painter towards the person in the painting at a glance. This person must be Master Qiao's lover, right? Although they did not know why he set the image of his lover as the god of death, it did not look out of place. Instead, it added a strange sense of beauty. Someone wanted to buy the paintings at a high price, but they were all rejected by Qiao Zhihe. Ever since his birthday, his body began to weaken rapidly. He probably knew that he would not live for long, so he made up his mind to reveal his true feelings to the world before he died. In the 8th month of the year 2393 of the Huaxia calendar, the famous painter Qiao Zhihe passed away at home. Before he died, he made a will that all the assets and paintings under his name, except for the portraits, would be donated to welfare organizations. As for the beautiful paintings that attracted the interest of countless people, they were cremated with his body and no longer remained in the world. Chapter 1421. This was a world that belonged to summoners. Every child in the Kingdom of Warcraft would enter the Empire's public temple of summoning at the age of 5 to awaken their talent. The test results were divided into 3 levels: low level, mid level, and high level. Level 1 to 3 summoners were low-level summoners. Such people may not be able to become a summoner in their lifetime and summon their own magical beast. And even if low-level summoners were lucky enough to summon a magical beast, it was likely to be an ordinary rabbit or turtle, a useless magical beast of little value. Level 4 to 6 summoners were called mid-level summoners. They could summon magical beasts corresponding to their own level. Intermediate summoners were the backbone of any force, and they were also the largest group of summoners. And once the talent was above level 7, they belonged to the high-level summoner camp. High-level summoners were divided into 3 levels: level 7, level 8, and level 9. The higher the summoner's level, the higher the level of the magical beast they could summon. Level 9 summoners could even summon kings of level 9 magical beasts like the iron-armored dragon. But in the whole Kingdom of Warcraft, there were very few people who could become high-level summoners. Every time a person with high-level summoner talent appeared, they would be hunted down by all the major forces without exception. Behind every high-level summoner, there was a magical beast with strong fighting power. Such a person deserved to be treated with respect by any force. This was the general background of the mission world that Gu Xingyin came to this time. The mission of this plane was a little different from the previous ones. In the past, the mission characters that she entered were much higher than ordinary people from the beginning. They really explained what it meant to be favored by the heavens. But this world was a little different. This was a female lead who walked the path of trash. Of course, the female lead, Yuan Tianyi, was not a real trash, but a fake trash with the bloodline of ancient summoners. Before Yuan Tianyi's bloodline awakened, in everyone's eyes, she was a trash who couldn't even be considered a low-level summoner. But after her bloodline awakened, those so-called geniuses in front of her were not even worthy of carrying her shoes. What was the biggest difference between the ancient summoners and the summoners of today's Kingdom of Warcraft? As everyone knew, every summoner could only draw a summoning spell formation at the age of 14 and summon a contracted magical beast that was compatible with their soul. And the magical beast that was summoned would be the summoner's lifelong companion, and it would also be the summoner's only companion. Every summoner could only have one contracted magical beast. But in the glorious era of the ancient summoners, it wasn't like this. As long as the summoner's soul power was strong enough, she could summon magic beasts without limit. This meant that they could have more than one magic beast. This was the difference. Even if I can't compare to you in terms of numbers, I will still beat you to death one by one. Moreover, there were many exceptional geniuses among the ancient summoners. In terms of talent, those so-called geniuses in the current magical beasts continent could not compare to the ancient geniuses. According to the development of the original plot, Yuan Tianyi was a direct descendant of the Yuan clan of the Dragon Phoenix Empire. Due to her poor talent, She had always been treated coldly by her family. When he was 14 years old, his bloodline awakened, and he successfully summoned the holy beast that had disappeared from the magical beast continent for thousands of years, shocking everyone. After that, he cheated all the way, smoothly killing monsters and leveling up, and finally reached the peak of his life. Chapter 1422. But if that was the case, Gu Xingyin wouldn't have come. Yes. Yuan Tianyi, who was supposed to go all the way to the top, was killed by a cannon fodder, who couldn't even be considered a supporting role. Yuan Tianyi was tested to have inferior talent at the age of 5. She might not even be able to summon an ordinary magical beast. Her family had always regarded her as an abandoned child. Naturally, she couldn't receive good treatment. When she was 10 years old, she had a serious illness. That illness was so dangerous that it almost took her life. A little girl who had received her kindness took the risk of leaving the Yuan residence and found a pharmacist for her. Her life was finally saved. However, this little girl was stopped by a young miss from a side branch of the Yuan residence, Yuan Qin. Yuan Qin was born in a remote branch of the Yuan residence. Because she was tested to have intermediate talent at the age of 5, she was taken back by the main family. She studied with the young masters and young misses of the main family, as well as other talented young masters and young misses of the other branches. Although she was also a young miss, there was no doubt that in terms of status, she couldn't be compared with the young masters and young misses of the main branch. So even if she was a summoner with intermediate talent, compared to others, her treatment was very good. But compared to those young masters and young misses of the main branch, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. Was Yuan Qin jealous? Of course she was jealous. However, she didn't dare to vent her anger on the young masters and young ladies of the Zhen family, because their background was much stronger than her, who was only from a branch family. In such a case, as a direct descendant of the main branch, Yuan Tianyi, who occupied the Tian name, but only had inferior talent, became the target of her venting. In Yuan Qin's view, Yuan Tianyi was so good. She was born a young miss of the main branch, which was an honor that many people couldn't ask for. But she occupied such a good position, but she was just a waste. Yuan Qin thought countless times that if she was in Yuan Tianyi's position, it would be good. Then she would also be a young miss of the main branch. She wouldn't have to force a smile in front of those young masters and young misses of the main branch, just to fight for the resources that fell between their fingers. The more she thought about it, the more she disliked Yuan Tianyi. Yuan Tianyi's temperament was not cowardly, but after all, the situation was stronger than the person. In some aspects, she did not compete with Yuan Qin. In Yuan Qin's eyes, she became the spokesperson for cowardice and did not know how to resist. The more it was like this, the more she wanted to trample Yuan Tianyi under her feet and enjoy the pleasure of comparing the noble young miss of the direct line to dirt. So when she saw the little girl coming out of Yuan Tianyi's courtyard, she stopped her, and when she knew the little girl's intention, she blocked her way. As a young miss of a branch family with some status, it was as easy as flipping her hand for Yuan Qin to imprison the whereabouts of a little servant girl. The little girl was being watched by the guards around her, and Yuan Tianyi, who was in the courtyard, lost her life because of the continuous high fever that couldn't be relieved. When she opened her eyes again, it was Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin felt sore all over. She tried to sit up, but found that her whole body was soft and she couldn't summon any strength. Although the high fever had subsided, her body was still very weak. She propped herself up and poured herself a cup of cold water on the only table in the house. The taste of the tea was not good. Thinking about it, an unfavored young miss would not have any good tea here. After drinking a large cup of tea, Gu Xingyin felt that her dry throat was relieved. She began to call the system. Chapter 1423. System, draw a skill. Feeling the weakness in her body, this was the first time Gu Xingyin wished that she could get a good skill. Otherwise, she would have to wait until she was 14 years old before she could awaken the ancient summoner bloodline and summon the sacred beast. For years wasn't an easy time. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the goddess of nature's creation skill. Creation? Gu Xingyin frowned. She thought for a bit, then reached out her pale and slender right hand and activated the power of her soul. A faint green light rose from her palm. When the light condensed, a small green fruit appeared in her hand. Gu Xingyin's eyes showed a hint of a smile as she put the fruit into her mouth. The moment the green fruit entered her mouth, it turned into a warm juice and flowed down Gu Xingyin's throat. This body was a bit weak because of the high fever, and her mind was instantly cleared. Finally, she was not that weak anymore. Gu Xingyin smiled with satisfaction. This green fruit was something that had never appeared on this continent before. Green fruit, a fruit that could quickly quench thirst and replenish stamina. In the Western fantasy world, it had always been the favorite of the mercenaries. And when the system did not stop her when she created this small fruit, Gu Xingyin confirmed one of her guesses. Ever since her soul became stronger and stronger, the restrictions and senses of the world's laws on her had decreased. If at the beginning, she used abilities that did not belong to this world, or even took out things that did not belong to this world, the system would definitely remind her. And the world's laws would also notice. What did this mean? It meant that as she became stronger, the influence of these worlds on her became smaller and smaller. In fact, she could even slightly break the rules of the world. For Gu Xingyin, this was good news. She sat quietly for a while, and when she recovered, she felt that her body was a bit uncomfortable. This body had previously experienced a fever. Her body had long been soaked in her own sweat countless times. Now that she was sitting in the room with the windows open and the cold wind blowing, there was an indescribable feeling of stickiness and discomfort. Gu Xingyin walked out of the house. Unsurprisingly, there wasn't even a servant in this small courtyard. As the young miss of the Yuan clan's direct line of descent, she didn't even have a servant in her courtyard. This was against the rules. However, who would be willing to come to a young lady who was born with inferior talent with no future to speak of? Those stewards also turned a blind eye to such matters. They only needed to curry favor with people who needed to be on their good side. Gu Xingyin knew that in a family like the Zhen family where power and benefits were paramount, if you didn't have enough power, you wouldn't have any right to speak. Her footsteps did not stop as she walked towards a certain place. When the head steward of the backyard saw Gu Xingyin, he was stunned for a moment before he realized who she was. "Third miss, why are you here today?" No one who could become the chief steward was a fool. Even if he looked down on this third young miss in his heart, he would not show the slightest mistake on his face. Only those small stewards with low statuses would seek death in all sorts of ways, fully demonstrating their IQ that needed to be recharged. Chapter 1424. When Gu Xingyin heard his words, she knew that the person in front of her was a smart person. She liked dealing with smart people the most. She raised her face and smiled at the steward. "I've been feeling a little uncomfortable these past 2 days. Today, I finally felt better, so I wanted to see if there was any hot water here for me to take a bath." When the steward heard this, his expression changed greatly. He said to Gu Xingyin, "How could you trouble third miss to personally come over for such a young lady?" When he said this, he saw Gu Xingyin's eyes that seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. His heart suddenly trembled. That's right, if there were servants by her side, how could this third miss personally come over? His tone changed and he quickly said, "Does third miss want to come in and drink some tea? I'll send someone to bring hot water to third miss's courtyard. In addition, I'll send 2 clever maids to third miss's courtyard, okay?" "No need." Gu Xingyin looked at the steward and said with a smile, "Thank you for your trouble, steward. It's just that I like peace and quiet, so I don't need 2 more people to disturb me. If steward has the heart, you only need to send someone to bring fresh and slightly warm food to my courtyard every day, as well as clean hot water at sunset every day." The steward felt that although she was only a 10-year-old little girl, this third miss's eyes seemed to be able to see through all of his thoughts. This third miss, who had always been ignored by everyone, didn't seem to be that simple. While he was still quietly thinking, Gu Xingyin had already lifted her leg and was preparing to leave. She had already said what she wanted to say. Presumably, with this steward's character, he would naturally satisfy all of her requests. The steward narrowed his eyes as he watched the little figure leave. Although the figure was thin and weak, her back was straight. In a trance, the steward felt that he actually felt an aura from this third miss that even the recognized genius, eldest young master Yuan Tianqin, couldn't compare to. He shook his head with a smile, laughing inwardly at himself for being so muddle-headed today. He was actually shocked by a little girl. However, because of this, he kept an eye on Gu Xingyin and paid more attention to him. For the chief steward, this was just a matter of a few words. However, his casual words made Gu Xingyin's life much better. Soon clean hot water was served. Gu Xingyin took a bath in a good mood. She had just changed her clothes and had not even dried her hair when she heard a familiar voice outside the courtyard. Is third sister here? This time Gu Xingyin recognized who it was. She sat on the stool and wiped her hair with a dry handkerchief, completely ignoring her. That person didn't hear a reply and didn't leave. Instead, he pushed open the door without waiting for the owner for a long time. When she saw Gu Xingyin sitting on a chair and drying her hair, a trace of anger flashed across her face. Big sister shouted so loudly outside the door, but third sister didn't even respond. What a strong aura! She sneered. Gu Xingyin looked at the girl in front of her. She looked like she was only 11 or 12 years old. She was clearly still at the age of naivety and romance. But her words and actions were like that of an old person. Using such a face with some baby fat to make a sneer wasn't intimidating at all. Instead, it was somewhat laughable. However, although it was laughable, when it was time to slap the face, it still had to be done. Gu Xingyin slowly put down the handkerchief in her hand. Her movements were obviously elegant. Chapter 1425. Her actions seemed to irritate Yuan Qin again. Yuan Qin looked at Gu Xingyin's appearance, and her heart was simply flustered. Just like this. Although her talent was not bad, she knew that for the young masters and young ladies of the branch family, unless they were those with heaven-defying aptitudes and reached the advanced summoner realm, the rest were never taken seriously by the group of people of the direct line. Because this was the capital of the Dragon Phoenix Empire, and the Yuan family was a prominent family in the capital, the upbringing and etiquette that these young masters and young ladies of the direct line received since childhood was not something that the branch family descendants from a remote place could compare to. She even heard two young ladies of the direct line laugh at them as country bumpkins. For this reason, she worked hard to practice etiquette for several months, but at most she could only not lose face. Like Gu Xingyin, who made people feel that her every movement was pleasing to the eye, Yuan Qin could not do it no matter what. Why? She could not compare to those talented young ladies of the direct line, so be it. Why could she not even compare to Yuan Tianyi, this trash? Gu Xingyin very calmly looked at Yuan Qin's angry face that turned white. The more angry she was, the happier Gu Xingyin was. Although she often couldn't understand why some people would get angry over such insignificant things, she still couldn't understand. As if she thought that Yuan Qin was not angry enough, Gu Xingyin raised her face and looked at Yuan Qin with a very innocent look. Sister Yuan Qin, I have been sitting here wiping my hair, and other than the sound of Big Black that Brother Tianheng raised next door in the courtyard, I did not hear any other sound. Yuan Qin's face turned from pale to ashen. The Big Black that Yuan Tianheng raised next door was a dog. This trash dared to call her a dog. She subconsciously reached out her hand, and a light yellow light burst out from her palm, directly hitting Gu Xingyin. This light ball looked small, but it was a martial skill in reality. If it hit Gu Xingyin, with her weak body, it was possible that she would directly vomit blood. When Yuan Qin shot, she didn't think that Yuan Tianyi, this waste, would be able to dodge. She was born with inferior talent. Even if she was given a martial skill, she would not be able to learn it in her lifetime. However, Gu Xingyin only took a small step forward and easily dodged Yuan Qin's angry attack. Yuan Qin raised her head and looked at Gu Xingyin in surprise. It was as if she was seeing her for the first time. How did you dodge? Gu Xingyin did not answer her question, but looked directly at Yuan Qin and said, Yuan Qin Jiejie, I Yuan Tianyi, no matter how bad I am still the Yuan family's upright young miss. The Zhen family had been taught for generations that siblings were not allowed to kill each other. Is Yuan Qin Jiejie not taking my Zhen family's rules seriously? Or do you not see yourself as a member of the Yuan family? Yuan Qin suddenly raised her head and stared at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin did not evade her gaze and looked back at her calmly. Upon closer inspection, there seemed to be a hint of mockery in that gaze. She was looking down on her. Yuan Qin clearly read Gu Xingyin's meaning. There was something in her heart that was ready to move. Yuan Tianyi, this waste, was really an eyesore. She really wanted to get rid of her and never let her appear in front of her again. Just when she was about to lose control and make a move, Gu Xingyin's voice with a smile appeared in her ear. Yuan Qin Jiejie, you must remember the Zhen family's rules. As if a basin of cold water was poured over her head. 8 o'clock ended. It's the last day of February. If you have a monthly ticket, don't waste it. Vote for Gao Lingji. La la la. Good night. Chapter 1426. Yuan Qin suppressed the urge to hit her. She looked at Gu Xingyin and sneered. I didn't expect that the fever didn't make you stupid, but instead made you smarter. Gu Xingyin still had a smile on her face. Sister Yuan Qin, you flatter me. Things like cleverness can only be judged by comparison. After she finished speaking, she was satisfied to see that Yuan Qin's ashen face had a tendency to turn purple. Gu Xingyin said to the system, according to this Yuan Qin's narrow-mindedness, how likely is it that she will be angered to death by me? System. Host, you've changed really. You're no longer the pure and unpretentious host that I know. Yuan Qin pinched the solid wood armrest so hard that a crack appeared. She said coldly, Sister, you've become a lot sharper with your words. However, it's useless to only have a sharp mouth. At critical moments, it depends on talent. Am I right, sister? She said this to annoy Gu Xingyin. However, the person opposite her acted as if she didn't hear anything and nodded repeatedly. Sister Yuan Qin is right. Yuan Qin only felt that there was a burst of anger in her heart that couldn't be vented, which made her very uncomfortable. However, the next moment, the other person said, a talented and quiet genius like Brother Yuan Tianqin is a good example for us to learn from. If your talent isn't good enough, you have to spend more time cultivating. There won't be good results if you come out every day. Gotcha. The armrest on Yuan Qin's right, which had a crack, was completely broken. At this moment, Yuan Qin wished that the armrest under her hand was the trash Yuan Tianyi. God knows how much she wanted to pinch her to death. Ah. Gu Xingyin jumped up in surprise and pointed at a piece of scrap solid wood in Yuan Qin's hand. Her shocked expression greatly satisfied Yuan Qin's vanity. She waved the thing in her hand in front of Gu Xingyin, as if she was demonstrating her power. The threat in her eyes was very obvious. However, Gu Xingyin just looked at her bitterly and hatefully. Sister Yuan Qin, whether you're successful in your cultivation or in a bad mood, why are you competing with a piece of wood? It's not like you don't know that I'm poor and can't be compared to you. You casually grabbed it and hurt yourself, but you destroyed my armrest. This. She looked very sad, and even her eyes were red. Anyone who walked in and saw Yuan Qin's dark face and the broken armrest in her hand, as well as Gu Xingyin's pale face and red eyes, would only have one thought in their mind. What's wrong with you? This Yuan Qin was looking for trouble, and she's already bullying her. When he came in, he had his own thoughts. He frowned. He didn't have any impression of the third sister's sister. But at the same time, he didn't have a good impression of this Miss Yuan Qin who came from a collateral family. What are you doing? When he spoke, Gu Xingyin noticed that there was a big black dog behind him, almost as tall as an adult's waist. She didn't know what breed the black dog was, but its hair was all black and shiny. Obviously, it was well taken care of. This was the big black dog that Gu Xingyin used to make Yuan Qin angry. Gu Xingyin secretly ridiculed in her heart. No matter how many worlds you cross, the aesthetic of human naming is the same. Chapter 1427. Yuan Qin's heart skipped a beat when she saw Yuan Tianheng. Although both of them were intermediate summoners, Yuan Tianheng was the young master of the direct line. His father was the younger brother of the head of the family, and his grandfather was an elder of the Yuan family. In terms of status, she was far inferior to this young master in the Yuan family. She was about to say something when she saw Gu Xingyin take a step back. She seemed to be frightened by Yuan Tianheng. Her originally pale face was now drained of blood. Her hands were tightly grabbing her sleeves, and her eyes were drifting. She seemed to be very uneasy. Yuan Qin sneered in her heart. Yuan Tianyi was so unpresentable. Yuan Tianheng didn't even say anything, and she was already scared like this. Didn't she know that the Yuan family hated this kind of petty behavior the most? She felt relieved. She felt that Yuan Tianyi, this idiot, had dug her own grave. She proudly glared at Gu Xingyin. When she was about to speak, she met Yuan Tianheng's cold eyes. There was no warmth in his eyes. She couldn't help but tremble. Then she heard Yuan Tianheng's cold voice, bullying the young miss of the direct line of the Yuan family. Do you think there is no one in the direct line of the Yuan family? Yuan Qin looked up in shock. What did this young master just say? He was protecting Yuan Tianyi? When did Yuan Tianyi and Yuan Tianheng have a relationship? She subconsciously refuted. No, I didn't. Yuan Tianheng was too lazy to listen to her. Uncle Shui, tell her to scram. Yes. A gray-clothed figure appeared out of nowhere and grabbed Yuan Qin's collar. Yuan Qin didn't even have time to speak before she was grabbed and disappeared without a trace. Gu Xingyin, who watched from the beginning to the end. She liked this style. The room suddenly quieted down. Yuan Tianheng also looked at Gu Xingyin. Before Gu Xingyin could say anything, she met his disdainful gaze. As a direct line of the Yuan family, you actually live like this. You are really useless. Gu Xingyin. She wanted to take back her words. This person's mouth was really annoying. Yuan Tianheng looked at her again and said, If Blackie didn't like you, I wouldn't care about your business. Dahe. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but look at the big dog that was almost as tall as her. What did this have to do with Dahe? When the big dog saw Gu Xingyin looking at it, it thought that she wanted to play with it. It was obviously very happy. And so, Gu Xingyin was beautifully pounced on by a big black dog that was even bigger than her. Dahe sniffed and licked her body. Obviously, it really liked her. Gu Xingyin tried to hold it in, but in the end he couldn't hold it in anymore. He slapped Big Blackie on the head. Stop it. Dahe looked at her with wet eyes. It was obviously very aggrieved, but it was very obedient and did not make trouble for her again. However, Gu Xingyin felt another burning gaze. She raised her head and met Yuan Tianheng's sparkling eyes. Yuan Tianheng was still expressionless, but Gu Xingyin seemed to hear a trace of excitement in his voice. How did you do it? Gu Xingyin didn't understand what he meant for a moment, until she saw his eyes looking at her hand that was still on Dahe's head. This guy wasn't Dahe his pet? Why was he looking at her with envy? She hesitated for a moment, and said something that was very annoying. Probably. I was born with it. Chapter 1428. Thus, on the first day Gu Xingyin came to this world, she successfully gained Yuan Qin's hatred and gained a friend. This friend was given to her by Yuan Tianheng himself. He probably really loved his dog, Big Black, so the person that Big Black liked was his friend, Gu Xingyin, who had been befriended. But when she thought about it carefully, as Yuan Tianyi living in the Yuan clan, becoming friends with Yuan Tianheng was not a bad thing. Gu Xingyin didn't know if it was because of the head steward's conscience or because of Yuan Tianheng, but she found that her life had become a lot better. Every day, there would be 3 sumptuous meals in exquisite food boxes delivered to her courtyard. Gu Xingyin requested it herself. She didn't like other people trespassing on her territory. On the second day after she came to this world, after asking for her permission, a large group of people dressed as craftsmen entered her courtyard. They only spent an afternoon to completely renovate her courtyard. Looking at the newly renovated courtyard, Gu Xingyin sighed with emotion. Finally, it looks like a living person. After everyone left, Gu Xingyin returned to her room. Her expression turned cold. It was obvious that these craftsmen were not the work of the head steward. He didn't need to rush to curry favor with a young lady who couldn't see a future. Then it could only be Yuan Tianheng. It seemed that she had underestimated the status of a direct descendant of the Yuan clan. It was no wonder that Yuan Tianheng said those words when he first saw her. It was obvious that she, who was bullied by a branch family descendant, was really useless in his eyes. She thought of the gray-clothed figure beside Yuan Tianheng, who threw Yuan Qin away. This was also one of the differences between a direct descendant and a branch family descendant. After the direct descendant of the Yuan clan had a talent test at the age of 5, the clan would assign a protector who was at least at the martial king realm to each of the promising direct descendants. These protectors were all nurtured by the Yuan clan, and would directly establish a contract with their new master. From then on, they only needed to be loyal to their own little master. Even if the master and the head of the Yuan clan didn't agree, the protector only needed to follow the master's opinion. From the day he became the protector of the little master, he was no longer a member of the Yuan clan. He was only a trusted subordinate of the direct descendant, a martial king realm expert. The Yuan clan was really generous. Gu Xingyin sighed with emotion. In this world, the highest position, summoners had the status. But aside from summoners and ordinary people, there was another profession, martial warriors. The status of a warrior was not comparable to that of a summoner, but high-level warriors were still respectable existences. Martial warriors were divided warriors, martial masters, martial kings, martial emperors, and revered martial artists. The main reason why the status of a warrior was not higher than that of a summoner was that it was very difficult for a warrior to advance. A martial king realm warrior was already an extremely powerful warrior on the magical beast continent. However, a martial king expert in terms of combat power might only be equivalent to a 6th-grade magical beast. As for martial emperors, they were already extremely powerful martial warriors in this continent. Even a high-level summoner would not dare to offend such a strong person. After all, in terms of individual combat ability, a high-level summoner might not necessarily be able to defeat a martial emperor warrior, because a martial emperor might not have the chance to attack a high-level summoner. Chapter 1429. However, although there are many high-level summoners in the magical beast continent, there are only a few martial kings. This is also the reason why summoners are able to seize the dominant position in this continent. Back to the topic. Although the Gen family is so generous, it's only for the direct descendants that they think have the potential to cultivate. For someone like Yuan Tianyi who doesn't have a future, the family naturally won't spend too much on her. What surprised Gu Xingyin was that it was impossible for the rest of the family to not know about such a big change on his side. But several days have passed, and no one has said anything. Although she knows this is normal, but there are no retards coming to fight, Gu Xingyin's heart actually feels a little uncomfortable. System. Host, you may need to take medicine. Gu Xingyin is still sighing. The Gen family is worthy of being able to stand on this continent for thousands of years without falling. Look at this direct descendant. In Yuan Tianyi's memory, except for Yuan Qin, that miss from the collateral branch who would think of ways to make things difficult for her, she has never encountered any difficulties. Thinking about it, in these big families, whether it's the collateral branch or the direct descendant, the competition is very fierce. Who has the time to waste on cultivation and study to make things difficult for Yuan Tianyi? A waste destined to not be a threat to them. They say they are very busy and have no time. They, to put it nicely, don't hit people when they are down. But to put it bluntly, they are indifferent. Complete and utter indifference. Because Yuan Tianyi has no value, it's not worth their trouble at all. Although they won't hit people when they are down, but when Yuan Qin makes things difficult for Yuan Tianyi, no one reaches out a hand to help. They don't care whether Yuan Tianyi is dead or alive. But for Gu Xingyin, this kind of indifference is enough. She doesn't need those people's care. Moreover, this kind of straightforward indifference was much better than those hypocritical care. Even Yuan Qin's simple and crude way of looking for trouble makes Gu Xingyin feel a little cute, stupid to the point of being cute. Of course, no matter what, Yuan Qin killed the real Yuan Tianyi. This is a fact. Gu Xingyin will not be soft-hearted to repay her. Night fell. Gu Xingyin sat alone in the small courtyard. She sat on the stone bench and tried to draw a complicated pattern on the stone table with her fingers. The mysterious lines moved along her fingers, and Gu Xingyin slowly traced the pattern in her mind. Because she was abandoned by her family as a waste, Yuan Tianyi had never learned anything related to cultivation or summoning. At this time, she was relying on the system to teach herself. The so-called self-study was actually just trying to copy the summoning array according to the ancient summoning blueprints. After all, the professional knowledge had already been directly transmitted into her mind by the system. Now she only needed to practice it. The system was still talking. According to ancient records, there were some exceptionally talented ancient summoners who could summon magical beasts that were bound to their souls before the age of 14. The system stopped halfway through its sentence. Gu Xingyin was also stunned. She was just casually drawing a picture of the summoning array. What was going on? Chapter 1430. On the smooth stone table. A thin layer of light suddenly appeared on the originally empty surface of the table. After those lights lit up, they connected together to form an extremely complex and mysterious pattern. Gu Xingyin. System. Gu Xingyin calmly said. System, it's time for you to shine. The system calmly activated its cheat and used a powerful barrier to surround the entire courtyard. Looking at the appearance of the formation, it was obvious that the host's summoning formation was working. While the person and the system were both very confused, they were also secretly anticipating what would be summoned. However, the mysterious formation was still glowing, but there were no signs of anything appearing. Gu Xingyin looked at it for a while and felt that nothing would appear for the time being, so she prepared to chat with the system. Gu Xingyin said, System, Yuan Tiany's body is only 10 years old. Meaning that she wasn't 14 years old yet. The system indicated that it knew. Gu Xingyin then said, System, Yuan Tiany doesn't seem to have awakened her ancient summoner bloodline. The system seriously said that it knew. Gu Xingyin continued. That was the first time I drew a summoning formation, so I just randomly drew it. The system thought that if it was in human form right now, it would definitely have a cigarette in its mouth and a face full of vicissitudes. Finally, Gu Xingyin asked, I said so much because I want to know how I was able to draw a summoning formation successfully. A summoning formation wasn't an easy formation to draw. Precisely because of the idea behind it, it was extremely difficult to draw. Its difficulty didn't lie in the pattern, but in the conditions required to draw a summoning formation. The power of the soul, the understanding of the summoning technique, the sincerity of the heart without any impurities. All of these conditions needed to be met. However, Gu Xingyin looked at the formation she drew while chatting with the system and fell silent. The system also used silence to answer her. To be honest, it also didn't know how the host was able to draw a summoning formation so smoothly. This didn't make sense. Just as the man and the system fell silent, there was finally a change in the summoning circle. The kind-hearted rune slowly dimmed, but at the final moment, all the light spots gathered in one place and fell to the ground. It was as if a figure was condensed from the light. A tall and slender figure gradually took shape from the light. Gu Xingyin stared with wide eyes until the figure completely appeared in front of him. This person had a head full of crow feather-like long hair that fell straight to the ground. He was wearing a fiery red long robe that tightly wrapped around his slender body. His eyes. Even Gu Xingyin, who was used to seeing countless beauties, couldn't help but reveal a look of amazement when she saw him. It was a beauty that could not be described by human imagination. When such a gorgeous and exquisite face appeared on a man's face, it did not seem out of place at all. The most eye-catching thing was the delicate red lotus mark between the man's eyebrows. It was as red as blood and complemented the red robe on his body. It was extremely beautiful. Such a person, no matter where he appeared, would definitely steal everyone's attention as long as he appeared. However, such a gorgeous beauty did not seem frivolous or flirtatious at all when you looked at him. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.